Okay.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Xiangrong Liu. I'm a faculty member from Management and Marketing Department. I'm also one of the co-coordinator for Sustainability Program. Joining me is another co-coordinator, Dr. Robert Hellström, and we want to welcome you to our BSU Faculty Student Sustainability Research Showcase. And then we want to take this great opportunity to spotlight our interdisciplinary sustainability research team. So this is our second part of the showcase, and we have our second team will present to you the Green Campus Initiative, a multidisciplinary partnership for promoting sustainability research through green learning space on and off of BSU campus. So Dr. Hellström, the stage is yours.
Oh, thank you, Sharon, for that kind introduction. Am I showing up on the video at this point? No, I didn't think that's okay. Yeah. So we are.
There.
Yeah, the slides are showing up. Great. So we put together a team this past summer as part of the inaugural interdisciplinary sustainability research program. I just want to introduce the motivation for our green team. First of all, we're trying to provide a field experience for students where they can share their expertise or their interests, such as studying indigenous roots of the Bridgewater area, native and invasive vegetation, climate science, and cutting-edge environmental science, sensing for green spaces on and near the BSU campus. And you can read this, but essentially what we're trying to do is get an interdisciplinary group of people together. And so we have 3 faculty members, myself in geography. I call myself a microclimate detective. John Kucich in English. I have dubbed the native thinker and plant whisperer. And then Margaret Black in computer science, also chair of computer science now, is the vintage computer enthusiast. Likewise, we have, we found 4 student members to participate. And that includes McGrath, who is currently in her teaching block. So she's not here today, but she is the innovator of place-based learning. Nick Souza of computer science is here in the room and is the wizard of sensor networks. And then Nicole Parent, master of environmental soundscapes. And then we have from biology, and then Kayla Anger from social work, the hardcore gardener and climate observer. So our objectives, John, do you want to talk about the objectives?
Sure. I think our goal was to really think about using the BSU campus and the area around it as a real teaching space. There's lots going on here. There's lots of interest. We share this space. So let's think about it and make that a more purposeful interdisciplinary project to enhance how students engage with the environment around them, particularly around issues of sustainability. So our goal was to broken up into several different initiatives. One was to think about the historical perspective on the Bridgewater campus area. Who was here before? Who were the custodians of the land? How do we connect to the native heritage of this place and connect to native communities who are around today was one key question. I think along with that was thinking about our non-human neighbors, particularly plants, which we see all the time around us and don't pay much attention to. And so we thought we'd pull together a guide to both some of the keystone native plants in the community and some of the invasive plants that shape our landscape and get a sense of how that landscape is always changing, often in response to our own actions around it. We're also trying to do more work with sensing and technology and using some of the really cool GWiz tools that Rob brings to the table and that to gather data on how this environment is taking shape today and use that data to kind of get a sense of what's coming out into the future.
My bad.
That's all right.
Yeah, perfect.
But there are a couple of different climate sensors Rob was installing and thinking about the context in which those are established and how does that change how we approach things like farming and gardening and food production in that area. And then the real goal was to pull together a website that makes this much more accessible and part of the fabric of everyday life, Bridgewater, for visitors and for our own faculty and staff. That's our longer goal. Broadly, it's really to have the campus thinking much more about the campus and the area as a focal point for sustainability going forward.
Yes, yeah, thank you, John. And I hope you all are still seeing the slide at this point. So
yeah, so we can see the slides.
excellent.
Because I
That's all we
cannot
need.
see you guys. Yeah, so your slides might be close to Dr. Black a little bit. Then we can see you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take this one.
How's that?
That's great. That's better, much better. Thank you.
So our methodology in this project, we have four students. Excuse me. I'm thinking four and I'm counting three. We have 4 students involved, and each one of them had a different project and a different mentor. But at the same time, there was a core focus or a core theme, and there were weekly gatherings. And each of the weekly gatherings involved field trips to a local farm. They involved plant tours on campus and looking at Native American relics. There was tours of electronics and the approach to making sensor networks. And each of these kind of, all this kind of put together to create kind of a less of a structured goal-based atmosphere and more one that was based on learning and having fun. Would you call that a fair estimate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Black. So I'll take this slide, but anybody who wants to mention a few highlights here, we really believe in place-based learning. In other words, immersing students into the learning environment and also sharing each of our interests with the rest of the interdisciplinary team. So in the upper left here, we got the gang working with Dr. Black in her lab here in the science building, looking at some hardware and then also software with the intent to monitor some of the climate variables at different locations around campus. There's some other images here. The one below that, if you take a look, is the Soul Homestead Education Center, which is located in Middleborough. And their mission is not only to educate K-12 students about farming, but also to act as a place where local people can farm the land. And in this one, we're just showing an image here showing Dr. Black, and there's Nick working with Joe Osborne, one of my students, to learn more about the process of measuring climate at this particular location, including some of the communications. Below that, another picture of Dr. Black in the lab, where the students are enjoying the show. Dr. Black has a tremendous interest in kind of historical perspectives, and then and also bringing that to reality of the current objectives. There's some more photos here, just showing you photos of the campus area. So there's the trails on campus where Dr. Kucich gave us a tour of the native place and history as we toured the trails. And so the entire crew learned about kind of the native space use we also have some more photos of Soul Homestead Farm there, where we're setting up some microclimate stations. All right, so place-based learning, and I'll let Nicole take over.
Yeah, what I was focusing on was the plant life on campus, both historically and how it was being used. And I kind of put the plants into two different categories, native and invasive. And my methods were generally, first, I just took note of what plants were around when we were doing all of the tours every week. Two, I kind of just asked Dr. Kucich, hey, what plants do you want me to focus on? And three, I got two books. One was a 1998 version of the Mass Audubon book of like all the animals and plants that are around in the area. And two was a pamphlet about invasive plants in Massachusetts. And I just like looked at what plants were on that list. And I made a list of the top 10 native and invasive plant species that are on campus. Yeah, so what I found. One thing that I found is that the plants that are in the Bridgewater area have changed drastically in the past couple hundred years. One example is that there are two plants, one being the American chestnut and two being the Dutch elm. They used to be the dominant, two dominant plant species in the area that whose numbers have drastically gone down over time. So for the American chestnut, it used to be a dominant plant up until the 1940s, where a chestnut blight nearly caused it to go extinct across America. And for the Dutch elm, the similar thing happened in the 1930s. And then, yeah, sorry, it's always happening, my percent. Next, for the native plants, we have, there are a lot of them on campus, but one thing that I found is that they're often overshadowed by invasive species. So in the middle there, we have multiflora rose and bittersweet, and they often overcrowded the examples of the native plants that I found. So one recommendation that I have is just to weed. Like there were a lot of cases where if those plants had been weeded, we would have had some really nice examples of native plants. And other examples I've found around, I think it's Miles Hall, there is an example of service berries, which are basically like June berries, which are basically like blueberries that were planted, which I actually like that example because they were like nice ornamental looking native plants that could actually have been harvested. I think that I fungus this year, so I did. I looked a couple of times, but there was a fungus on them, so maybe check for that. But I actually liked what was being done there. And the last plant I have is just strawberries because we have a sustainability garden where we intentionally planted a bunch of native plants, and that was nice because it was a nice example that could be engaged with by the student body. Another piece of advice is maybe lead it more or employ some more interns. But like that was a really nice start. My final piece of advice is that I saw that in a bunch of places invasive plants were intentionally planted, or maybe were just left to grow. So before things are planted, look to see if they are native or invasive. And if they are invasive, how bad are they? And do not intentionally plant the really invasive ones. Yeah, sorry if that happens.
You want to go next slide? We show a link to the guide you put together.
Thanks.
That will load up. Yep. But Nicole did tremendous work in pulling together lots of research and photographs and then making it into a very usable format. So our hope is that this will be something available on the website. Do you want to talk through this at all, or just look through it briefly?
So the focus of this guide was to make it look like page in an encyclopedia. So for that example, we have their name, their scientific name, some plants for them, and some of them have a whole bunch of pictures if I thought that they were necessary. because I want them to be easily identifiable. I want you to look at the sky and be able to identify if you see this plant, if it's actually this plant. So I'd often have the flowers, the leaves, the whole picture of the plant if possible. If the plant like had any interesting features, like one plant flowered in winter, so I put that on there. Then we have a description of what it looks like, what it's used for. Like we have a couple trees that are important in the lumber industry, so I put that in there. If they're edible, I mentioned that. Although in some cases they're edible, but only if you were careful about it. So I also put that in there. I also featured a few plants like poison. I think I got the poison ivy, where I just put that in there as a warning.
It's a native plant.
It's a native plant
Very native.
that you should be careful not to touch. I figured that if we're going to be sending people out to look at plants on campus, I should warn them about the dangers of looking at the plants on campus.
Fantastic. This is great.
Thank you.
So again, the idea is that eventually we want to put this on a website that is accessible to the BSU community.
Yeah,
And so we're building this database. Yeah.
I want to make it so that anybody who could read could look at this and have a fair idea of what plant they were looking at.
Fantastic.
Awesome work. And I'll speak for McGrath, who again is in the teaching block right now, but she pulled together a really great document about Bridgewater's native space. You can click on that briefly. And again, this is meant to be something that will be available on the website as a resource, people who want to learn more about what the native context is for Bridgewater. She starts off with a land acknowledgement, which we're still working on getting an official one from the Bridgewater community that we can access, but Ali thought we should put together one for Bridgewater. We can scroll down here and just recognize that we're on Wampanoag land, and it's a community that still is very much ongoing and revitalizing itself. We need to be aware of both its history and its current status. Some context about settler colonialism, on the early history of Bridgewater, on King Philip's War, which is really the war that finally kind of transferred the land from being a really native space to being an English colonial space. And some great research on that. The war certainly moved through Bridgewater. And then some other reports on native history and throughout the time, including things like the Earl Report, which is a census of native peoples in the 1860s. And then some links to different tribes who are in the Bridgewater area, the Mashpee Wampanoags, the Mattakeesets, and some of the native context of the Taunton River. And then Ali kind of did some work that overlapped with what Nicole's doing on some of the keystone native species that helped drive native subsistence patterns and some questions that people have. And she was building a set of interactive games that you could do or lessons you can do with students and visitors at different ages to Bridgewater. So it's, again, a work in progress, but some really great work.
Thank you, John. All right, Kayla, do you want to speak to your notes a bit?
Absolutely. I had some pre-written stuff that I kind of like have to read as I go, or else my mind will get all over the place. But as a social work major with a sustainability minor, I'm interested in our interactions with the earth and how it has affected us mentally and physically. However, my role in this collaborative internship has been to document and identify green spaces on campus. In addition to the locations, Dr. Hellström has set up weather stations with a physical description and also with the Global Observer app, taking notes of things such as air temperatures and the water content of the soil. Some of these already identified spaces include the greenhouse, the solar parking lot, the Great Hill Trails, the permaculture garden, and this is just like general information about the geological concept of it. And these spaces offer further opportunities of research and beautiful opportunities or beautiful spaces for students to go and do more research. Recommendations of of future green spaces or projects include digital mapping. We had talked about the GSI mapping as well. The possibility of more student research or labeling plants, as Nicole had mentioned earlier, around campus that were planted intentionally. We also talked about like the negative aspects of that, where like places like the indigenous ruins almost might be vandalized. Generally more engagement with the green spaces we already have, and additionally projects such as the Sustainability Bonus or Seed Library have been discussed. We also include examples from other colleges to include more sustainable projects and classes on campus, or other projects such as surplus furniture programs or enhanced recycling in the residence halls as well.
Thank you, Kayla.
Yeah.
So believe me, there's a lot more information to give here, and but we're just so thank you very much for that. Yeah. I'd love to show you the weather data that we're collecting now from the weather stations.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's awesome. But let me go back to the slide here. Hopefully find it.
I think there are a couple links you had as well.
Yes. I think I gotta quit this. Bear with me here. Sorry. Trying to go back to our slide presentation. It's not it. This is the way we do it. So let me go back to our presentation here. We'll get them all rolling again.
Yeah, Robin can help you to show the website.
Oh, it's okay. We can look at it a little later, maybe. The weather box.
Oh,
Nick,
boy.
take it away, Nick.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being in attendance. My name is Nick Souza, and I'm the computer science student on this project. It's going to be a little difficult to follow up on the tremendous work of my colleagues, but I'll do my best. To keep things simple, I kept my presentation slide to simply pictures of the project that I worked on this summer. The goal here was to create an autonomous device that can measure weather data in the field, transmit it to a receiver unit that will then publish that data online on our website for students and community members to reference whenever they please. My project serves as the basis for this concept. If you take a look at the picture on the left, that is it sealed up. It's a weatherproof plastic container with a solar panel sticking out, and at the bottom you can see two nodes. The one on the left measures temperature, the other sends something out over radio. And if you look at what's going on inside, we have a big array going on to power it running through the middle. On the left side, you see the temperature node that I referred to earlier, sends data all the way around through a loop to a little chip in the bottom right there. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but what that's doing is it's reading in and managing all that information. So that way it can then go down to the chip and is shoved in the bottom there, which of course goes to the radio band and sends things out over radio. And then this last picture shows the receiver unit, which is a simple Raspberry Pi that reads in that information over radio and saves it to an SD card. Obviously, saving it to an SD card is not our end goal with it, but building a large form device, as I've detailed, is very difficult for one person to do alone over the course of a summer. And while I am very proud of my work, I cannot wait for future students to take it and build upon it and completely destroy what I originally had to make something perfect and amazing to achieve our end goal. Because at the end of the day, that's science. And if there are no questions for me, I will pass the mic, so to speak.
Thank you. So Dr. Black, do you want to mention some of the takeaways? Having heard from all the students and
Okay. So Dr. Hellström kind of asked in advance, what sort of lessons did we learn from this? What did we take away from all this? I would say, and it's a good deal of thought here. So a few lessons that I think kind of I learned over here. Some of the challenges we face is there is a certain amount of time required to get students up to speed in a project. And it really should not be underestimated how much time that takes. And that does not mean that the students are not very bright and cannot get up to speed, because they do. But it is something that needs to be built into the project. This tinkering and learning, that it is not enough to just present a student, here is something that somebody has built before, learn it fast and build on it. It takes time for the student to actually understand it and build it a little bit further. I think it was very good and challenging though. Each of the students did work on their project, but at the end of the day, it would have been better if there had been more opportunities for the students to present their projects and maybe integrate them together. So these are some of the takeaways that I felt from this. At the same time, there was an element of casual fun that was kind of in here. This is of all the various interdisciplinary projects that I've been at it since I come to Bridgewater, this was probably the most relaxed. And I like that. I appreciate the willingness to have fun rather than follow a schedule.
Fantastic. Yeah, those are I think we all agree as far as the faculty. I know we're speaking about the students here, but Dr. Kucich, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll know that the collaboration was interesting. I think it was certainly fun. It was enjoyable.
Yeah.
But it's fun just to spend time with people who are bringing different things to the table, and that's faculty and students alike, where you have different interests, different observations, and learning kind of picks up in a really rich, immersive way. The other piece is particularly about the green spaces is the power of place-based learning when you're outside somewhere, when you're in an environment where you're moving across a landscape and talking about a range of things, going to the Soul Farm, going to a site where you're putting together a weather station. That kind of immersive environment, as opposed to being in a Zoom room by yourself or being in an isolated lab, like things come together in rich ways. And you feel like you're connecting to this whole range of things that touch on all these different aspects of our lives. That's really powerful.
Agreed. We have one more slide here, our future intentions.
Yeah, I think the website that's really the goal we're looking for, and it's proven tricky, partly because there's so much we don't control about access to the Bridgewater web material, and it also takes a fair amount of technical skills to take what we've produced and make it into something that's very usable by people putting together a website. And that's I think our goal was always to have this be a kind of long-term project where different elements get picked up by the people and move forward. And that's a piece that we is really the next step, is how to take the kind of work we've done and make it nimble and widely available and enjoyable.
Yeah, certainly we want to make it accessible, and I like calling it peer-to-peer learning, where students are learning from each other. So from the great work that the students have done here, as Nick was alluding to, take my stuff and play with it, future students can really build on these projects. And so we're leaving a legacy by having a web presence that is accessible. And really that is one thing I want to emphasize, is that peer-to-peer learning idea of one cohort learning from the previous cohort and building upon it. So Dr. Rue, that's all we have. We certainly would love to take some questions at this point.
Yes, thank you very much for our student research and our faculty researchers. You gave such a wonderful presentation to connect all the different disciplinaries together. And we really see this kind of the power of integrating the research together, because I see that we have the wonderful writing about the plans. We have the discussion about the plans. And we do have also some, actually, from the report, we also see this kind of educational piece of how to use the green space. So that's really wonderful. So now we open the floor to all the question and answer session. So please feel free to raise your question or provide the comments. I know Inkyang had 2 questions. Would you like to go first, Inkyang?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to share my questions. But before asking questions, I want to congratulate your team for the beautiful teamwork. And it's amazing to see how you developed your very rough idea about team collaboration, interdisciplinary program up to this far. I want to really appreciate your efforts for developing this project up to this point. I have 2 questions. I shared my questions in the chat box. The first one, I found the invasive species on campus. That's fantastic. And I want to know, I want to learn about it more and more. And I want to visit those invasive species on campus. So I'm curious if you, Nicole, have identified the specific locations of these invasive species in your report. If
I remember correctly, I did. I know there was in one draft. I'll have to double check. I think for the autumn olive,
They're listed in terms of the rough area.
yeah, I know I did. I'm pretty sure for the autumn olive, the multiflora rose, and the bittersweet, I'm pretty sure I did. There's one location that I think has literally all 3. So, what's the retention pond called again?
Oh,
That's the drainage pond.
it's just retention.
Retention pond. The retention pond has all 3, and I think I mentioned that like they're literally all there. And that's a particular example that I want to mention because they're there and strangling out the really pretty native life. And so if they were just like weeded out, then like we could make it a place where we make the native plants like shine. But unfortunately they're there. Some of them are really pretty. Like there's a really pretty autumn olive branch. However, it's also invasive. Yeah.
Thank you.
Put in more because I remember where they are, but they should be in the report.
I think the information that you have collected itself should be published in Bridgewater in some publications so that community members can be informed. Another key question that I wanted to ask is what kind of integration efforts have you made? So through your presentation, I learned by smaller groups, you pushed your kind of a specific research agenda. And I'm wondering what kind of integration of your research have been made to fulfill the interdisciplinarity of your research. For example, I was blown away about John's team's research about the history of Bridgewater and New England. And I wanted to know how that kind of historical analysis of our community to be related to the invasive species kind of presence, pervasiveness of these invasive species. So have you ever kind of connected these 2 different dots into one story?
I think Ali's work did that pretty well because she's thinking mostly about like where the native species that were really important to native peoples, and they very much were part of that network. And I'll note that when you talked about how invasive species spread, you talk about them colonizing a landscape. So the language embodies the same kind of dynamic. A lot of invasive species come for a range of different areas. Oftentimes they're brought in as garden specimen plants, then just take over. That's the case for Japanese knotweed in particular, and Oriental bittersweet. Others are coming in as part of like road projects. So autumn olive was brought here as a kind of roadside highway plant stabilizer. And others just kind of show up in shipping. So Phragmites, which takes over a lot of the wetlands, just showed up as container ships go back and forth and leave ballast. So it's not so much they're tied to the exact history of how native peoples get dispossessed, but they're very much part of what it means to live in a modernized world with a global capital exchange system. And indigenous peoples are very much at the forefront of trying to hang on to these more indigenous landscapes and make sure the plants that are part of these systems survive. We didn't go into in much detail. That'd be a great place to go further down the road. It's a real focal point for sustainability research.
Yeah, I can also speak to that. So one thing that I focused on for my project is the lack of the American chestnut in our ecosystem. And that wasn't an intentional dispossession effort. That was a fungus that, no one in America liked. That was accidentally shipped over in the 1940s. However, as a result of that, anyone who would want to, like any indigenous person who would want to further re-engage with what used to be their people's land would lack one major food species because the American chestnut really can't grow here anymore. Another thing I'd like to talk about is that a lot of the invasive species I've found grow in my neighbors' yards on purpose. They've just become a part of the American landscaping culture. And so in order to I don't know, change that, would have to have like a cultural shift, which I'm sure a lot of my neighbors would not particularly appreciate.
Yeah, and just quickly add something building on all the comments. So basically, I think we are trying to add all the students and researchers' work into our extranet for sustainability program. So I think we want to make all this information transparent and easy for other students and researchers to access. So I really appreciate all our students' research have been done through the whole process. I know Jeba and also Wenkai also have some comments in the message. Robert, would you like to stop screen sharing so that maybe we can see all of each other in the screen? Thank you so much. That works very well. Okay. So Wenkai and Jeba, would you like to provide your comments? I know that you put it into the chat. Maybe it would be easy to talk.
I can also mention, okay, so Jabbar, you're asking about peer-to-peer learning. I know that Madhu, Lauren, you are working with that a bit. And how can my class join this project in spring 2022? Well, Sharon, we're delighted to have you join. Of course, Jabbar, and especially if you have some students that you can send our way. I will say we already had a call out and have successfully secured 3 faculty teams for the spring and also into the summer, which are very unique teams of 2 faculty each and maybe 3 students each. And we support them through the sustainability programs budget, both faculty and students. So, but Jabbar, maybe we can chat, and maybe John, you, and Margaret, maybe we should have a chat about peer-to-peer learning. That's fine.
That would be nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, another way to integrate this together is that we can, as a sustainability program, can endorse this project as a kind of like a cube project. And then maybe you can work together for the whole class if you plan to take upon this as a course class project. So that's another way to, I think, to continue the research process and the educational part of this. Thank you, Jabbar.
Is it possible to come up with a topic, just, like first year seminar or second year seminar, just specifically to address this project and then the application of it? I mean, I like the idea of having 3 students, 3 faculty, but if we can, I mean, I have not, I cannot pretend that I have experience in this, but it's very interesting if we can have a class of 15 or 20 students, then they can labor around this project and get the space there, and the experience is wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. I think for this research grant, usually it is still limited by number of faculty and the number of students in a team. But when we talk about the course project, I think maybe that CUBE's collaborative university business experience could lend a good hands in that sense to provide some financial support to students and faculty explore more about a certain kind of a topic you want to research in class. So I just like bring this up that might be some potentials we can collaborate on.
I agree, Sharon. I think that, you know, if there's a small portion of these classes that are sharing an experience, we could create a 1 week project around that, where the classes get together and have a problem-based learning activity to work on together as a class. It's just a matter of getting the faculty together to decide in our syllabi, well, what week are we going to do it? You know, with the technology we have now of Zoom and so forth, it's easy to do, and we can even bring it out into the field, you know, with a cell phone. So I think this is cool.
Yeah, so totally agree, because Jeba, one of the reasons why I know Robert's like weather stations information is because one of my classes is taking on the project to analyze the data from the weather station building in the permaculture garden. So we do want that every information we create here, just like Robert mentioned, a peer-to-peer education. So we kind of use and continue to use all the information we collected instead of just it becomes a one-time thing, you know. So that's the worst thing we want to do for the sustainability program. But I think I'm so glad to hear, Jeba, you want to do that. Thank you. So any other questions from our audience?
Since you mentioned my name, I'll just say a couple words. I think we're trying to really promote sustainability practices on campus over the last decade. And John has been and Ron have been doing so much work over the years. And now with Income, Sharon and Rob joining the team, and it's really a wonderful team for doing the work in various aspects, because I see the different things that the team's been doing is interconnected. The environmental justice discussion last semester and the sustainability research grant this semester, the interdisciplinary studies discussion among the faculty and all the work we've been doing, they're interconnected. So the more collaborations we have, the better outcomes will be for faculty and students. One of the interesting development is to connect it to current discussion about climate change and COP26. Maybe just the sustainability studies program can really organize something in the spring semester looking at COP26 and what comes out from that and what doesn't go enough. Obviously the march that you did the other week, and I must confess that I didn't have time to participate in any of that, but I'm well aware of all the great work that the program's doing. You can let admissions office know about that. You know, they have all these new students coming in, and we're doing cutting edge work on sustainability, so they should know about that as well. So.
Actually, that just reminded me of something. One thing I think that we should definitely do with our work is get the university to use it to promote themselves. Like something that really occurred to me when we were doing all our tours of campus is that if we just labeled things, we look way more impressive to prospective students. Like label the cool trees, put up plaques to show the research we're doing. Like that sounds like something admissions departments at any university would love to put up just to make themselves look more, you know, make themselves look like a better college to be at. And we have those, we just need to label them.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So that's a part of the reason why we're trying to promote our extra night inspired by Jeba, actually. So I think that works very well. And I'm also very glad that with the Increon's efforts and our previous interns' efforts, we are be able to add the permaculture garden as one of the spots for the tour, welcome tour for the new students. So in the summer, because we work in the garden, so we noticed that lots of tour pass by our site, and then they talk about the permaculture site, permaculture garden and sustainability. They are very excited about this opportunity. But at the same time, they do ask that whether we have a major in sustainability. So unfortunately, we only right now we have the minor, but we do want to expand it along the way. So I think Wenkai, you definitely hit a very good point. So we do want to have more collaboration with the international side. Your part, basically, in terms of some inviting speakers to come to talk about those major things internationally. And also, we are also looking forward for more kind of international tour regarding to sustainability.
Maybe even broadcasting some of your activities around the world, and the partners can come in and share, and maybe have a collaboration for a virtual event in the future. And that could be a way to get them involved.
Yes, definitely. And also, Wenkai, don't feel regret that you didn't get a chance to see the climate strike. We do have a photo show in the library, 3rd floor from the next week, from Monday to Friday.
Great.
Yeah, and then we will spotlight some of those pictures from the climate strike.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you all in the audience for attending this green initiative for the campus. And I hope that you all will continue to have interest in our program, because we certainly will continue to build upon it.
Yeah, so I don't know whether there's any other question from the other audience, especially we also have our student intern Janani here. And also Joa, it's our first time to meet you. So feel free if you want to comment anything. And also Ron, our very important faculty for our permaculture garden. So feel free to share any opinion or suggestion. We still have 1 minute to go.
I was just listening, and it was impressive hearing the collaboration. I like multidisciplinary issues myself, so it was interesting hearing everyone's opinion, especially the green, the flower stuff. It was interesting.
Yeah, so I know that you are running something regarding to Cape Verde. We are kind of very curious. So what kind of things that we can collaborate in terms of the food system, planting system? So any courses regarding to sustainability in Cape Verde, or something we can kind of continue the discussion about?
Joao is actually from Sustainability 101 this semester, and we are running a fully online class. So it is hard for students to develop collaboration, research collaboration that John and I usually, always promoted during the in-person Sustainability 101 classes. I think, Sustainability 101 has been a great platform to advocate these interdisciplinary kind of a team research. And I can't wait we go back to those, in-person classes to promote those kind of research activities.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I think we open this kind of opportunities, especially later on in terms of ISR students application. So we will send out the call for students. If you are interested, you definitely can join the ISR for the next year, next summer. So again, I really appreciate all our researcher, student researcher and faculty researcher did for the whole ISR projects, and I'm really looking forward to see you in the future. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Mills. Thank you.